I see we have a little dog friend visiting us. That's always appreciated. I'm joined by my equally friendly Vice Chair, Dana Stein, and the wonderful people who are apparently all in other committees presenting bills and not here. That's very disturbing. Anyway, so let me just tell you the order of the bills that we're going to take these things in. We have 12 bills today, 60 witnesses. House Bill 474 and 625, Delegate Ampry. House Bill 166, and by the way, House Bill 474 we have three friends from the Ways and Means Committee joining us, Delegate Hornberger, Mirku North, and Dalia Attar, who you will remember from having been on this committee, but she's not here now, so who knows. Okay, after that, House Bill 166, Delegate Grammer, followed by House Bill 315. And this is a bill that was sponsored by then Delegate Alonzo Washington, and I understand his legislative aide is going to come by and present for it. Then we will have House Bill 338 by Delegate Boyce, House Bill 425 and 460 from Delegate Taylor, who I have yet to meet. House Bill 501, Delegate Queen, House Bill 532 and 534 from the real property man cave of Delegate Holmes, House Bill 567, Delegate Robin Lewis, and then the last bill of the afternoon will be House Bill 608, Delegate Lehman. And let's start with House Bill 474. Is Delegate Ampry here? There he is. Also formerly of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Welcome back, sir. It's always good to see you.
It's good to be back. I know you don't have the governor here today, but you have me, so. So did you want to, are we starting with, I have two, but so we're starting with 474, or did you want to?
Yeah, 474, then 625, so let's start it that way.
All right. For the record, Delegate Marlon Ampry here in support of House Bill 474. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be amongst you this afternoon. So, House Bill 474, I'll first start by, it's an amendment to a previous bill that this committee passed in 2021. It was brought forth by then Delegate Lehrman, now Comptroller Lehrman, and it was also testified upon by our current governor in the Senate when it was over on the Senate side. So I first want to thank the committee for helping us get this done.
Wait, you're talking about 474, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Hold up, I'm sorry. Am I confused here?
We want to start with 464.
I'm sorry.
474.
So that's the sales of residential real property offers. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun. I'm going the wrong way. Save that for later. So this bill is the bill I brought forth last year in the same form. We changed the numbers a little bit, and this is more so regarding the issue of housing in our country. I don't know if you all have noticed, but if you watch the news, if you watch national news, there's an issue of crisis going on where we are having huge hedge funds and companies buying up single-family properties. Individuals who are trying to buy homes, start a family, they're not able to do so because when they come to the table with all the money that they have and they put in that offer, these huge hedge funds from New York are able to put in an offer that's 20 to 50% higher than the offer that's provided. So it's becoming more of an issue across the state. In particular, it's becoming an issue in Baltimore, where we see in portions of Baltimore, especially in the areas known as the Black Butterfly, where more of our Black residents live, we're seeing a large amount of foreign investors and investors who are buying up properties and making it harder and harder for individuals to be able to buy their homes. And what this does is it stifles the opportunity for individuals to build wealth. We know that home ownership is the pathway to wealth. It's how many people draw equity to start businesses. It's how many people draw equity to pay for school, how many people draw equity to take care of their families. So this really, it's harming a lot of people. It's not just a housing industry crisis, it's literally stifling the access to wealth for Americans, and particularly here in Maryland. So the purpose of this bill is to ensure that what the bill will essentially do is create a right of first offer period. And I ask you to read the bill in more detail, read the written testimony. We'll create a right of first offer period so that the first 30 days that a home is a residential real property for sale to a third party for the first 30 days to accept only an offer to purchase the property made by an individual, a community development organization, a nonprofit organization, or a real estate enterprise that owns an interest in less than 3% of all residential real property located within the county in which the property is located. So the purpose of the bill is we're not trying to preclude small companies from being able to purchase homes, single-family homes. If the chair and I wanted to purchase a Airbnb and start, a home there, we could do that. The purpose of the bill is to ensure that these large hedge funds are not buying up single property homes. So that is the purpose and intent of the bill. Additionally, the bill also imposes a transfer tax of 15%, which will be applied to any real estate enterprise or subsidiary of a real estate enterprise that has an ownership interest in residential real property in the state with a total assessed value exceeding $12 million or an ownership interest in more than 120 single-family residential real properties. And again, these numbers I'm more than happy to move around. This is the number that, based on our data, this is the number that made the most sense to ensure that we are not having these gargantuan firms buying up the properties. Again, this is just a pathway forward for us to preserve the access to single-family homes for individuals and small companies in Maryland to ensure that the access to wealth and opportunity is available for all. We also have a letter from the Attorney General, so we get the same information letter that we had last year, finding that it would be constitutional for us to move forward with a process like this. So with that said, I urge a favorable report, and I'm happy to take on any questions that you all may have.
Well, let's first go to your virtual witness, John Kern, who should be joining us virtually. John, are you there? Ah, wonderful. Okay, Mr. Kern, welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Greetings, everybody. Thanks so much, committee, Mr. Chair, and the delegate for introducing this bill. So just for a second about what I do. So our group, we're a nonprofit. We're called the SOS Fund, and we've been here on a couple of bills this session. We do direct intervention to stabilize neighborhoods. So we work with a lot of legacy homeowners in East and West Baltimore, and we kind of are in a unique position to take the pulse of the neighborhoods and watch, the trends that are happening within communities in terms of homeownership and just the power that community has to see the type of development outcomes that they want to. So we have a very favorable outcome in this bill. There was a piece, I don't know if folks saw in the Washington Post during COVID, we were very active at that time. We actually formed during COVID. And it said that 49% of new home sales in the neighborhood of Sandtown, Winchester, were investor buyers. So as you can imagine, there's a large land grab that's been happening. We know the situation in East and West Baltimore. We've seen how homeowners are vulnerable to displacement, and that's where we do as many interventions as we can to stabilize the homeowners, but they're under enormous pressure to move out of these properties. And you have an extreme interest from investor buying coming in to try to transform the neighborhoods. There's no question that we want a diversity of outcomes in neighborhoods, but this 30-day period is, I don't think, at all too much to ask, just to give folks a chance to step in and say, hey, I want access to the housing market. I want to step in, make a good offer, have it be accepted before, as the delegate said, they get priced out by these investor buyers. So we want a mix of ownership in the neighborhoods, but having this first opportunity for new home buyers to come in, folks that are returning to the city, and to play a part in the neighborhoods. We don't think it's too much to ask, and we want to urge a favorable on this vote. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to questions for the sponsor and for you, Mr. Kern. If any of our friends from Ways and Means have a question, just come up here and push the little button. And the first question right now will go to Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, and I'm sure you've thought of this, but I wanted to know what your answer is. In the case of these single-family homes that may be already abandoned, in a bad condition, and in an area where you want to do rehabilitation, does your bill address that, or do you have a different idea about how to deal with that?
So the bill I'll talk about next does address that in a more thoughtful way. But in regards to that, in regards to your question, so I think the 30 days, if we have a vacant house problem in Baltimore, I don't think a 30-day wait is going to stop us from ensuring that those problems are taken care of. I think what the 30 days does is just allows for individuals, small companies, Maryland-based companies to really have a chance at the first bite of the apple. So after those 30 days pass, then it's up to the market to decide if we want to redevelop a region. And I think that it's important that we have people who are investing in Maryland from everywhere. I think it's fine for investment to take place. It's just that when we have single-family homes becoming the target property for investment, that is where it gets a little more tough for us to build the communities that we want to see, and it gets a little tough for families to be able to build the wealth that they want. So I think that the 30-day wait doesn't necessarily preclude us from dealing with the vacancy problem.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Amper, this is a two-headed question.
Yes.
Because it goes to Delegate Stein at the same time. So last week we heard a bill from Delegate Stein relative to green space in urban areas. And it required $5, $7, and $10 million of investment coming out of program open space. And that's funded by transfer tax. So your bill here takes money from the transfer tax to develop your program. I believe, if I read this correctly, altering the rate of the state transfer tax payable for an instrument in writing for sale of a certain residential property. So like I said, this could be a question I don't know the answer, and I don't know if anybody does, but is there a relationship between altering that transfer tax, Delegate Stein's bill relative to using program open space funded by transfer tax to invest in green space in urban areas, and do they correlate together, or are they mutually exclusive?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I would say the transfer tax that we're imposing here isn't a way to fund anything different. The purpose of the transfer tax is to make sure that if we're going to have these large investors investing, then they need to put a little more skin in the game as far as supporting our state. So that's the whole purpose of the transfer tax here. It's not to actually create a fund for it to do something different. It's just to ensure that these larger companies have to put a little more skin in the game if they're going to be buying up single-family home properties. So that's the purpose of that. And again, I've talked to those who are currently in opposition to the bill about those numbers on the transfer tax numbers. And, I'm more than happy to sit down and figure out what number makes sense, because the goal here is not to preclude our Maryland companies who are doing great work in the communities and who are involved. Many developers are. The goal is to make sure that the intent and purpose of the bill is to make sure that these large hedge funds, these large foreign investors are not taking away the single-family home opportunity for Maryland citizens.
Okay, thank you.
Damn, and I thought we had a possible conspiracy going here. The next question goes to Delegate Hornberger of Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's a great bill and appreciate your intent here. We hear a ton of these bills in Ways and Means, so we've got a little bit of background on, but not a real estate professional. My concern is we do have situations where folks find themselves in hard times, or maybe they inherited, but they need to liquidate the property quickly. And what we're hearing is that when folks desperately want to get rid of a property, these foreign investors, these liquidators will swoop in, they'll encumber the property, right, or force the person to sign a contract, lock them in for a period of time, 30, 60, 90 days, and not actually execute the contract, which further puts that person, it's a predatory model. It further puts that seller in a situation where they don't have income, they can't sell the house, but because of this thing that they've signed in good faith, thinking that the person's going to buy it is not being exercised, and that these predatory groups use that to lower the price. So they'll keep coming back with counters, I can't sell it, you've signed this contract with me, if you don't take the lower price, I'm going to hold on to it for 90 days. So your bill looks at a 30-day basically, cooling period, or allows other folks to, if I want to liquidate my property quickly, in the background of this predatory model that I just described, does the 30-day also add another hurdle to making it more difficult to quickly liquidate my property in the open market?
So I don't want to get into a philosophy conversation around what does 30 days mean for a person, because 30 days is a lot of time, and 30 days is a little bit of time for some. Sure. I think it's a reasonable amount of time. That's where we landed on 30. Also, the bill makes it clear that it's whenever you're selling it to in the third party space. So I can walk up to you and we can have a private sale. That wouldn't preclude that from happening. The issue that we're having is people are literally going on Zillow or Redfin, and they're excited about this new house that they're going to have their 2 kids in, and they go check it out. They think they have the right offer, and a hedge fund swoops in and takes the opportunity away from them. That's what we're trying to end with this bill. If you're an individual and someone calls you and makes you an offer on your home independently, that's a different transaction that wouldn't necessarily touch what we're doing here with this bill. But I think the 30 days is a reasonable time frame and where we arrived upon. So I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, let me know.
Thank you, Delegate.
I have a number of questions. First of all, I think we should acknowledge that the only reason this business model works is because we have a shortage of housing in the state of Maryland, which therefore creates a business opportunity for these hedge funds to buy up properties and then rent at a very high rate. So none of this would be occurring if we had a functioning rental market in the state of Maryland. Do you agree with that?
I would agree, but I would also say that what we're also seeing in states like Texas, the article that I read that got me to look at this was literally there's communities where developers are building up an entire community of single family homes. People are thinking they're going to be able to go buy a home, and literally the entire community is sold to a hedge fund.
Well, that's
so
a good point.
Even
Texas
new
does
homes
that.
are being sold to hedge funds, right? So
well, that actually leads to my second question. Is this happening primarily in the case of new home developments, or what scenario is the most likely for this to be? Is it new homes or existing homes, or does it not matter? Do you know?
It's a good blend. Based on my assessment of our nation, it varies on the region. I think that in the South you're seeing it happening a lot with new homes, even in the Houston area, in the Houston suburbs, in the Atlanta suburbs. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution just did an article about the same issue they're facing in Atlanta. So it's happening with new homes. It's also happening with older homes and redevelopment, especially in the Northeast corridor, where there's new excitement around neighborhoods that have been kind of forgotten, and now they're reemerging. So it's a blend of where it's happening.
Okay, let me ask. My final question has to do with the increase of the transfer tax. That surprised me a little bit because I understand the parts of the bill that would regulate where large investors swoop in and buy 500 houses. I understand your desire. I don't know if I agree with the bill itself, but I understand your desire to put an end to that kind of a practice. And I understand the thought process behind the 30 days. I don't understand why the 15% tax is necessary. If we struck that from the bill, would it really hurt the bill?
I think that the purpose of ensuring that hedge funds have to wait their turn, I think it wouldn't necessarily harm that part of the bill. I think that ultimately, though, what I'm worried about, and the reason that we put in this transfer tax system originally, and I'm more than happy to discuss another option, was you get a good lawyer and you get some smart people, you can figure out how to make some subsidiaries that work in a way that functions in a way in which you can work around some things in regards to how to set up a company to be able to purchase and buy homes. So the goal there is to ensure that if an entity owns a certain amount of the market, that once they've reached a certain part of the market, just so that they are putting more skin in the game and ensuring that there's not an over purchase of single family homes. That's kind of the goal with that part.
But you could do all those functions of the bill without the tax provision, couldn't you?
Maybe.
The fundamental of the bill, I think, and I haven't read it in detail, is Part A, which which has prohibited behaviors, and Part B, which has a tax increase. You could just do the Part A part and prohibit people from going in and buying 500 houses and just have them just pay whatever the standard transfer tax would have been. Couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a possibility.
Okay. Any further questions for the sponsor or his witness? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none, I will now call up the opponents to the bill, Robert Enton, Krista McGee, and Lori Graff. And I think only, oh no, all three of them are here. Okay.
I'll try.
Bob, would you like to start?
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Robert Enton, on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And we are opposed to the bill. I did meet with the sponsor and discuss it with him. I told him we would be coming in opposed. I don't know, if the bill can be modified. I thought your questions were right on point, Mr. Chairman. The bill has two facets. One requires that that you wait, send this notice at least 30 days. The other has this 15% tax. Both of these will have a very chilling effect on the transfer of property, not just for real estate enterprises or big companies, but for you, for me, for your neighbors, and your constituents. The definition of a real estate enterprise means it's a business that's conducted by one or more individuals who owns real property, including a tenancy by the entirety. You and your wife own it, right? And you're involved in buying, selling, leasing, or managing real property. Well, if I want to sell my house, I'm involved in selling real property. Now I'm a real estate enterprise. So if you jump down to the bottom of the bill, that means when I transfer the property, the buyer or the seller is going to be subject to a 15% transfer tax. If I need to sell my house, or my parents need, your parents need to sell their house, and now all of a sudden, or you want to sell it, you want to move to a smaller house, you want to move outside the state, you can't afford the mortgage payments anymore, doesn't make any difference. You're now going to have a 15% transfer tax under this bill because you're going to meet the definition that's in the bill. As to the first part of the bill, it restricts, you have to wait 30 days. And once again, the definition of, it says if you're going to transfer it to a real estate enterprise that owns an interest in less than 3% of all of the residential property in the state of Maryland, I don't have any clue whatsoever what that is going to be. So I'll wrap up, Mr. Chairman. I think this bill, while I know it's well-intentioned, would need a tremendous amount of work. I'm happy to work on it. But I think in its present form, it's just not, doesn't make any sense, and
Okay.
we're very much opposed. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Lori Graff next. Lori, welcome back to the committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Lori Graff, CEO of Maryland Building Industry Association, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on this bill. And Mr. Enton described what the bill did, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. And we do thank the sponsor for meeting with us. I do think there's some merit in trying to dissuade the hedge funds, and we understand that that's the intent. But I did a little bit of research, wanted to find out a little bit more about this market in Maryland. So I reached out to some of our builders, and there is a market for build-to-rent, more townhouses. We have, our land costs here are just too high, so it's not as prevalent as it may be in other parts of the country. But there is, while we all want home ownership, absolutely, there is a market for single-family in towns of rentals. It's a transient market. There's high transactional costs for home ownership, so there are people that want these types of properties, and this is just going to disincentivize the market. And as you guys know, and I'm sure I'll be here talking about this many more times, we need more housing. The only way to get rents down in this state and housing down is by creating more of it, and this is just going to disincentivize that. That's our concern. We don't feel that this just gets rid of the hedge funds. It also gets rid of, these builders are small family-owned companies. They're not the big companies like Blackstone that this bill is intended to prevent. So with that, we would ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am Kristen McGee with Maryland Realtors. We could have came in here today as being favorable with an amendment because we do realize that the impacts of high concentrations of institutional investors have on communities. Concerns including decreased housing supply for buyers, higher eviction rates among renters, and we fear higher foreclosure rates in the future. As you'll see in our written comments, our objections to this bill are about the approach taken to deal with this issue. It would be very difficult, if not impossible, for a typical home seller in a typical real estate transaction to manage the process required by this bill. We've had productive conversations with the sponsors, and we thank them for their attention to the issue. Realtors will continue to work with them to find another solution that does not have the same impacts on a real estate transaction. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. The first question goes to the Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's for Ms. McGee. Just to follow up what you said, so realtors, I mean, if this bill were to pass, realtors wouldn't be in a position to properly guide a buyer as to what the law requires?
The problem is determining who one of these institutional investors who may have multiple LLCs, determining all the LLCs and determining if, of course, they are an institutional investor.
Okay, so you're saying realtors would have difficulty in assessing whether someone who's a potential buyer is disqualified from making an offer during the first 30 days?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Mr. Enton, I mean, I understand your argument. My mom, before she moved into assisted living, sold her house, made a big profit on that, and she lived on those profits. So I don't want to do anything to interfere with any retiring individual who has to go into assisted living or who has some other financial need. I don't want to interfere with that, obviously. But there is the allegation that these are typically out-of-state companies. They are not Maryland companies. They buy up huge tracts of property, and they are taking advantage of a market defect that is especially happening in northeastern states where we don't have enough housing production. And, you know, I don't know if we can pass a law like this, but there is definitely a problem, and it appears to me that certainly the people that you all represent, maybe not so much you, Bob, but maybe the people that Lori and Krista represent have an interest in not allowing people to swoop into our, well, bankers exist throughout the whole country.
I'm here for the builders today, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you're here for the builders. Then I take back what I was saying. Then all of you have an incentive to make sure that this kind of market conduct doesn't occur. I mean, is there some way to stop this behavior without harming any legitimate transactions in our state?
Let me say this, Mr. Chairman. First of all, once again, there are two parts to the bill. There's the transfer tax part, the 15%, which is very, very, very broad and applies to, all kinds of real estate transactions. There are no thresholds. Then there's this 30-day notice provision. We talk to our members. We have members that are national companies that do business in every state in the country and build homes in every state in the country. We have members that maybe build 100 homes or 50 homes a year. So it's the largest, it's the medium size, it's the smallest. We are not aware, and I would disagree with the one witness that talked about Sandtown, Winchester. I live in Baltimore. I lived there my whole life. We're not aware that this is a problem in the state of Maryland today. Maybe it's a problem in other jurisdictions. I'm not aware that it's a problem at all today in the state of Maryland. Secondly, for houses in Baltimore City in particular, what you do see are investors coming in and buying like a whole block of vacant houses that are boarded up and have been boarded up for years, and then rehabbing those houses and either leasing them out to somebody or selling them into the marketplace. And I think this would have a chilling effect on that as well. If this were a problem in the state of Maryland today, I think I'd have a different testimony. But we're not aware that it's a problem at all, and we do think that it'll have a chilling effect on housing. So, we just really think it's something that isn't appropriate. Maybe there's another way to address it. Maybe I don't represent any hedge funds. You want to limit it to hedge fund sellers or buyers, hedge fund buyers, fine. But we just don't see it as a problem. We do think it'll have a chilling effect on the real estate market in Maryland. Lori might have.
Go ahead, Lori.
Delegate, just real quick, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. Actually, the realtors are the ones that brought it to my attention. There is a federal law that's looking at this right now. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but they are trying to limit hedge funds going into these communities. So, again, something to look at. I think there is solutions. It's just I think this bill has a lot of problems with it.
Okay. Well, there appear to be no further questions, so that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 474. Are you guys ta-ta? Okay. House Bill 625, Delegate Ampry again.
See if I can get my bills right this time.
Okay. Yeah, just go segue right into what you started with last time.
Good to be back. For the record, Delegate Marlon Ampry here in support of House Bill 625, the appraisal gap from historic redlining financial assistance program. Again, I want to thank this committee again for passing this original bill in 2021. It was brought forth by our current comptroller, former delegate, and it was testified in support of by our governor on the Senate side. So we have overwhelming support for this bill and this program. So in 2021, the House and Senate passed a bill which established the appraisal gap from historic redlining and financial assistance program. The purpose of this program is to provide financial assistance to affordable housing developers working in low-income census tracts in order to help close appraisal gaps that occur in historically redlined neighborhoods. So for those who are new to the committee, what that means is often in some of the communities, especially in my district, we want to see homes get redeveloped, especially the vacant homes. But you go buy a vacant home for $5,000, $10,000, you put $150,000 into it, but you then can only sell it for $80,000. So, and these are mostly communities that have been historically redlined, communities that were disinvested in years ago. So the purpose of the original bill was to ensure that those who are working to get these communities back up in order and get these communities back to where they should be rewarded for their efforts in helping close that appraisal gap. So what this bill will do is allows an individual or business entity that incurs eligible construction expenses related to the construction or substantial rehabilitation of residential property in low-income areas to apply for financial assistance. So House Bill 625 seeks to strengthen the original bill by redefining what affordable means in reference to how much a family pays in housing costs to the IRS definition. So it allows younger people without much capital and a limited income to be able to apply for the program. So we're trying to get more individuals to be involved in this process. Right now, the appraisal gap program does not allow its financial assistance to be used on loans or grants and requires applicants to wait until the fiscal year when the project is complete to receive funding. And we know if you're in the business of redoing homes, you need assistance throughout the process, not just at the end. This bill will also expand how the financial assistance can be used and push the application timeline up so the program works better for smaller developers and younger individuals who may not have the capacity to pay out of pocket and wait for the capital assistance. Again, the proposed amendments in this bill will allow the appraisal gap program to expand so that more people and developers can invest in our neighborhoods. We have support from the mayor, the Department of Housing, and you can see throughout the who's going to testify today. We have overwhelming support for this bill. You all have done it before. I ask that you do it again, and I urge a favorable report for House Bill 625.
Okay, who would like to go next? Ma'am, give us your name and please proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nina Themelis. I serve as Interim Director of the Office of Government Relations for Mayor Brandon Scott, and I'm here to testify in support of HB 625. I want to thank the delegate for introducing this bill. The change in the definition of affordability will benefit the city's housing efforts both in our impact investment areas and middle market areas to have the flexibility to support households earning up to 120% of the AMI. The administration supports this alteration because by limiting funds to 80%, we may not build household wealth. The program is intended to cover the appraisal gap, and it is an established fact that home ownership is one of the effective paths toward creating intergenerational wealth. And providing funding to cover the gap between construction costs and what the market will bear will make owning a home a reality for hundreds of families in the city. Baltimore has been fortunate enough that developers working in its historically disinvested communities would meet the legislative requirement of being both located in a low-income census tract and as a state sustainable community. Many of these developers are themselves small minority startup businesses who, because they are undertaking their initial projects, lack the track record necessary to assess other resources of funding. Through the Community Catalyst Grants Program, the city's Department of Housing and Community Development has begun to address the lack of capital and appraisal gap, but is limited in the support that can be provided. The State Appraisal Gap Program would leverage city and other resources, significantly increasing the number of vacant and underutilized properties that can increase the city's tax base. And so for these reasons, the city administration requests a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate, is there anyone else on your panel to testify?
There are more people that testify in support of the bill.
Okay.
If they want to come up.
All right, why don't we have them come up, and then we'll take questions after they've presented.
Yep.
Go first? Okay. Is this mic on? Okay. Hi, good
Welcome.
afternoon, committee. My name is Bree Jones. I'm the founder of an organization called Parity Homes, and I helped, along with my comrades here, helped draft the original language of this bill. Parity is a 501c3 nonprofit affordable housing development company based out of Baltimore City. And our mission is to attempt to heal the harms created by historic redlining by acquiring abandoned properties, renovating them, and then applying subsidy to sell those homes affordably to folks who have been historically marginalized from wealth building opportunities. And in this work, I came to realize that there is a phenomenon called the appraisal gap, and that's when you can, put almost $200,000 to $300,000 in rebuilding these dilapidated properties, but the homes don't appraise enough for you to recoup your costs, and that's partially why a lot of vacant properties just don't get developed. They sit indefinitely. And for folks like us, up here at the podium, who are affordable housing developers, we have to be really creative of how we find flexible capital to fill that gap and make our homes affordable, but it's really difficult. And so in talking to Senator Hayes, we put forward this appraisal gap bill, which would create a fund to close the gap so that we can do more houses. And what's really important to know is that this is not just a Baltimore City funding source. This would go, across the state of Maryland and could potentially create anywhere up to like 800 homes per year. And when this bill was passed in 2021, unanimously, we had an outpouring of interest in people across the country reaching out to see how they could implement this legislation in their municipalities. And so in many ways, the state of Maryland has been leading the nation and leading the conversation in equitable wealth creation. So thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Owens, and I'm the president of Monarch Butterfly Enterprises. We established our firm in 2016, and we are environmentalists at heart. Our firm restores home and scattered site housing throughout the city of Baltimore. This approach is typically not for everyone, but we are especially proud when we take that worst house on the block, that house that everybody's been waiting for somebody to take on. the house that criminal activity happens, the house where the grass grows to 12 inches or higher, where everyone has to call 311 50 times to get the city to come out to do something. They hold our neighborhoods hostage. I take on those houses. I really love it. The houses that I take on, I don't think I've taken on one that has a full floor all the way through. There are usually 2 floors left standing and 1 floor that's hanging on, or the 3rd floor is in the 2nd floor. And those are the houses that we want to preserve. We want to bring back the community. We want to bring back the neighborhood. I used to work at DHCD, Maryland DHCD and BDC. So I learned development and understood the role and the toolbox that is put together for developers. This is a tool, along with CHAP, along with Maryland Historic Tax Credit. This is a tool that belongs in the toolbox. This is needed because of the rise of construction costs that usually takes us over the edge where we can't even get the funding necessarily to take on these houses. It is critical, it is vital that you pass these 2 bills so that we can have these tools in our toolbox. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next?
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Wilson-Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network. We are a statewide network of colleagues, as you see here today. These are all of our members. Today, I just want to speak in support of House Bill 625. I know that these conversations will often come to talk about property, developers, markets, but I hope we also center the discussion around people and the investment that's needed to take communities that have, particularly communities that have been historically redlined, to vital places that people want to live. And these communities exist not just in Baltimore City, but they exist in Baltimore County, the Eastern Shore, Prince George's County. They exist throughout every area. There's a bad area of town. And the question in my head is how we take those areas and make those areas of opportunity. And I think this gap appraisal bill really seeks to do that. We need to reverse the lasting impacts of redlining, and we have not been successful in doing that. But we have to focus on the people that live there. If we want to close health disparities, if we want the blueprint for education to work, we're going to have to make places around those schools that we're investing $20 million in. And this is one way we're going to be able to do it, is by investing in that gap appraisal. Because as you drive around in communities that have been historically disinvested, everyone looks around there and says, can't we do something with these houses, right? We all have these experiences. Can't we do something with this? We can't do something with it if the cost of doing something with it is more than what we can sell it for. So with that, I ask your favorable report on House Bill 625. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dan?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Vice Chairman Stein and members of the committee. I'm Dan Ellis. I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Housing Services of Baltimore. We are a nonprofit organization that believes that economic and social justice is a right for all people and communities. Typically, in a given year, we're helped between 300 and 400 people who buy houses. And we also do community development, working to buy, renovate, and sell houses to people. Typically, about a third of our home buyers are below 50% AMI, and many are below 80% AMI. And so working with that population, it's critical to create affordability. But one of the challenges we have is that the cost to buy houses and renovate them often exceeds the amount of money for which you can sell it. And that's selling it at the appraised value. So one example that I'll use, and we're doing about 30 houses this year, and probably about 20 of them will have an appraisal gap on them. So it's not every house, it's only the ones with the gap. But one house is 3007 Walbrook Avenue. It's in West Baltimore, as all our houses are. It's a house where we spent $277,000 buying the house and renovating it. We had to do structural work, and typically it costs right now about $150 per square foot to renovate a house. That's up from about 110 a square foot maybe 4 or 5 years ago because of the escalation in construction costs. And so as prices have risen, the construction cost has risen faster than the increase in the value of properties. And so a $44,000 gap existed on this particular house. We were able, in this case, to use a federal subsidy called New Market Tax Credits, which some of you may be familiar with, to create the opportunity to do that home. But that's a limited resource, and the more resources we have, the more houses we can address. We need all the tools in Baltimore that we can get to address the 15,000 vacant properties that we have, and so we appreciate your support, a favorable report on House Bill 625. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Nanika Namdi here?
The creator of Fight Blight Be More and the co-creator of the Stop Oppressive Seizures Fund, where we do work to remediate blight in ways that support community development in Baltimore. I'm here in support of House Bill 625. Simply, the appraisal kit is the result of 100 years of racist housing and community development policy, much of which came from Annapolis, right? And so there's a duty of this body to repair the damage done, fully funding this bill, making sure this bill has all of the necessary tools to remove the barriers, including increased measures for affordability, is really important. And again, I'm here to urge a favorable report on House Bill 625.
Thank you very much. We do have a couple virtual witnesses. We'll go to them first and then take any questions. Let's see. John Kern.
Hi there. Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm here to urge a favorable report on House Bill 625. Like I said before, I work alongside Ms. Nika Namdi at the Stop Oppressive Seizures Fund, and we work to do housing stabilization in Baltimore City. Our sister company we're right next door to Parity Homes, and watching Ms. Jones work in these neighborhoods has been astounding. And I just want to point out, I think everyone's eloquently spoken about how important it is to remediate the vacant houses and how, an enormous drag that is on the neighbors who are still living in these communities. So that's the first thing. But I think what's interesting about this bill as well, and we have to consider, is that we don't have an interest property in the neighborhoods. We have a capital stack property issue in the neighborhoods. So I think that gets at a larger mythology about the way that these neighborhoods are spoken about and treated, which is that people think, oh, there's just no interest in these houses. Nobody wants to live there. And this is incredibly offensive to the people that are still living there and fighting to keep their neighborhoods strong. But I think what Parity Homes has exposed is that there's an enormous interest in these neighborhoods. People are incredibly excited about the renewal that's happening, about all the programs and all the culture that's arising just recently in the neighborhoods, and that interest should be celebrated and it should be supported. And if this is just a construction problem, let's fill the appraisal gap. Let's get the houses back to market, and let's keep it affordable so all these folks that are interested in moving back to the neighborhood can return and can be part of the renaissance that's going on across our communities. So I highly encourage a favorable report on this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor or any of the favorable witnesses? Okay, seeing none.
Not all at once, not all at once.
No? Yes? Yeah, no opposition. There's no opposition. So seeing none, that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 625. Delegate, thank you very much. Next, I'd like to call up Delegate Grammer, House Bill 166.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Robin Grammer here to present House Bill 166. House Bill 166 alters the qualifications used to determine standing
for community associations when seeking judicial relief for nuisance actions in Baltimore County. If this bill looks familiar, this was originally Senator Sidnor's bill, which I went on to sponsor in the House. The bill has passed both the House and the Senate, but not in the same year. This section of code was enacted in 1997 in response to growing problems of community blight in Baltimore County. Our community was one of several jurisdictions to put in place similar language to deal with community blight issues. However, the current language of this section is prohibitive to the functional use of the statute. Specifically, the household, dues, and bonding requirements under this code make the code impractical and out of step with how modern community associations work. Baltimore County has massive and growing problems with community blight. Most frequently, the problems center around public health issues related to trash or rats. One problematic actor can create a huge problem for a street or a community. This bill passed the full House in 2018, the full House in 2019, and the full Senate in 2020. It is in the same posture that it has passed previously. The section of code exists for a purpose, and I do appreciate being able to follow up a panel that talked about community blight. It's a serious issue in Baltimore County and Baltimore City, but I believe this code does exist for a purpose, and it should be functional so that we can use it. This bill attempts to make it functional so that we can address community blight issues that impact poor communities in Baltimore County. Thanks for the opportunity to present House Bill 166. Be happy to take questions, and I would ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Let's go to your virtual witness, Lynn Mitchell, and then we'll entertain questions for you and her.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Mitchell, are you with us? No? Okay. In that case, are there any questions for the sponsor? Yep, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for bringing this bill,
Thank
Delegate
you.
Grammer, and for your persistence in
Thank
bringing
you.
it back again. Can you talk about why the bonding issue was removed, the bonding requirement?
Yeah, so, going back as far as the original bill file for this bill in 1997, they talked about that issue. And, a bond could be $100,000. I actually talked to the Greater Baltimore Board of Realtors about this bill, and one of the folks who we were speaking with said, I had a similar issue in my community. And I remember this exact issue because we went and we had to get a bond. We couldn't get the bond, so we had to look for another avenue. So, unfortunately, it looks like Ms. Mitchell, who is a community association leader in my district, she can't join. She's having technical issues, I guess. But she was on that call and she said, look, I have problems soliciting volunteers at all, let alone someone who's going to pay. And when they do pay, it's $10 a year. So how am I going to raise money for a community association, let alone a bond that could be $50,000, $75,000, $100,000? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And my community association also, as many, have problems with participation as well.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for the bill. Just a question of clarification of intent. It seems to me like this bill is also kind of addressing maybe some of the similar bills that we've heard today already. I don't know if you walked in to hear some of the other bills. Is that kind of what this is doing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And our district's border, I picked up Hawthorne this time. That's where I actually grew up. We have a lot of the community blight issues in communities like Hawthorne, like the previous panel had spoke about, and those kind of issues are specifically what we're looking to get at. For better or for worse, our housing stock is increasingly owned by people who don't live there. I saw a graph yesterday, and for the first time, new housing in this country, the numbers of build to rent were higher than build to own. So when someone said, entire communities are now built and bought by hedge funds, that's not a surprise. In this state, we don't even require foreign real estate investment trusts to register here. So frequently, we see the community association leaders, God bless them, they tend to work with people and try and address issues. But when you have an actor who is just proven to be chronically disinterested in helping with a community blight issue, it's nearly impossible to fix. So, yeah, it's a long answer to a short question, but yes, very much this is looking to address the kind of issues that it sounds like we're talking here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the sponsor before we go to the opponents? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to a virtual opponent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Frances Taylor. Ms. Taylor, are you with us? Oh, or Mr. Taylor. Pardon me.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Francis Taylor. I am president of North Point Peninsula Council. I'm testifying today in opposition to HB 166 as proposed. Our North Point Council has represented our community for 52 years. I know Delegate Grammer well. The language, other organization in the bill, page 1, line 21, we feel is too broad of a term, and it needs to be defined. We recognize challenges that other organizations and associations might have meeting membership goals on page 1, line 22. We get that, and that could possibly be addressed. It's imperative that community associations have a verifiable membership on page 6, line 6. Dues are the way that residents participate and passively support the organization. It's not enough for an organization to say, without putting any effort and outreach, that they represent a community. Again, page 2, line 20 lists other organizations. Needs defined. It's too broad of a term. A group of 2 or more community associations, as mentioned on page 2, line 23, is not a community association. It is a community council, and we think that it should not be characterized the same as an individual community association. The bylaws and charters of the individual association should determine that. And in addition, Baltimore County is a vital partner to community associations, and their acknowledgement that an organization is legitimate is critical. It's a critical tool used by community associations, citizens, and government. It's page 2, line 14. It's important to keep this requirement. Thank you for your time and consideration of the comments. Community associations, and I do appreciate the time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Delegate Ruth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here, Mr. Taylor. So I just wanted to ask, why is it important for a community association to have verifiable membership? My community association has very low participation. We have challenges. We know we have challenges. The pandemic made it so much worse, where after 2 years of people not going out because we didn't have community association meetings in public, and yet membership has dwindled even more. And yet, I'm on the board of the community association, and if somebody comes to us who's a homeowner within our geographic boundaries, or a resident, and they have an issue, we help them. We deal with it to the best that we are able to do, even if they are not a member of the association.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wondered why that verifiable part is important.
We absolutely had impacts from COVID. Our in-person attendance, we have monthly meetings. In-person attendance is down. We're doing virtual presentations from our meeting. They're all Facebook Live now. And we're getting hundreds of hits. So people aren't watching the whole meeting, but they're watching the topics that we're bringing up. We have an organization in this area. We've had a couple different organizations in the area where a couple people have gotten together, started what a community association, have no meetings, elected themselves, represent themselves as representing the community. We think it is absolutely imperative that if you claim to be a community association, that you can show that you have this, you're never going to get 100%, but that you have support and you have participation from members of your community. So maybe your community association is in a position where that's not really imperative, but in our experience, it has really benefited us in contact with government agencies and other private businesses to be able to show that we do have meetings, we do have outreach, we do have a newsletter, that those type of things are very important. And that's how we communicate and get feedback from people. And it's not just our own personal agendas for whatever that might be.
Thank you, and I mean, it's certainly admirable that you've been able to keep your association up and keep it active. You know, appreciate the answer. Thank you.
The Vice Chair has a question, and sir, when you answer, if you could perhaps sit a little closer to the microphone. I've been having a little bit of difficulty understanding what you're saying.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Taylor, you're on about your comment that there should be some requirement that the association represents or is composed of residents. Well, the bill does say, this is page 2, line 3, that a community association means a nonprofit association, et cetera, that is, among other things, composed of residents of a community defined by specific geographic boundaries, et cetera. So doesn't that mean that an association, for purposes of this bill, would have to show that it's got membership that's composed of residents?
Yes, that is in there. I think the concern that we have from that is when it says other organization, I think, and I don't have the bill right in front of me, but I think that's associated with what you had just read. An other organization could be anything. And we really do think that that needs to be defined as to just what that is. Could it be a rec council? Could it be a church? Who knows? And I'm not singling them out for any reason in particular. We just think that that has to be something that's defined.
Okay, thank you.
There can't be ambiguity.
Okay, let me follow up with a question along that score. So I get the distinct impression that your concern is that a group of people might gang up on a different group of people. Is that really what you're concerned about?
Not necessarily one association ganging up on another association, but it could be these organizations, these other organizations ganging up on somebody they don't like in their community, maybe.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
It could definitely be that without going through the channels that are in place now. The community associations now have the direct contacts with the local governmental agencies. We have that communication. I just think it's important to have that structure, especially when you're trying to affect somebody else.
Okay.
I agree there's no doubt about that. Yeah. I'm concerned about what's being removed as much as what I'm concerned about is what's being added to this bill.
Okay. One more question, Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to follow up on the chair's question. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you would agree that communities should have standing. You just want definitions to be narrowed versus broadened. Do you believe that? Yes, sir.
I do agree communities should have standing. I think it is necessary that the definitions are there, but I also think that the verifiability that an organization who claims to represent the community can prove that they do in fact represent the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There appear to be no further questions. Thank you very much, sir. And that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 166. Let's proceed to House Bill 315. Is Sam, there we go, Sam Jackson. You're representing now Senator Alonzo Washington. He was a delegate when he put this bill in, so a little bit of an anomalous situation, but the committee has the possession of the bill. So go ahead and we'll give him, go ahead and give him 4 minutes. He's speaking for an elected official.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you guys letting us come down and testify on the bill. It's a little bit of an odd situation, but for the record, my name is Sam Jackson. I'm Chief of Staff for State Senator, former Delegate Alonzo Washington. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 315, dealing with smoking policies in multifamily dwellings. To keep it brief, many condo buildings here in the state of Maryland are old and outdated. We have many vulnerable families who still feel the effects of secondhand smoke. This is an issue where smoke can seep through unsealed walls and floors. According to the CDC, secondhand smoke causes nearly 34,000 premature deaths from heart disease each year in the United States among adults who do not smoke. It's a really serious issue. I don't have to sit here and read off all of these, data points, but, to help address this issue, we're proposing House Bill 315, which will provide more options to families and individuals affected by secondhand smoke. Very simply, this bill requires a common ownership group of multifamily housing condos to develop a policy on smoking. While the provisions laid out in the bill are important, they're not overly burdensome. In the bill, you'll see listed out the requirements for the policy are the locations where smoking is allowed on the premises, any conditions on the ability to smoke in areas where smoking is authorized, potential fines for violations of the policy, and guidelines to submit a complaint about policy violators. And I'll just also mention that, this is just what they have to produce for people who want to live in these areas. The policy can be very, very simple. They could not have any fines. So I just want to make that explicitly clear, that we kind of left that open-ended intentionally in the legislation. And really what this comes down to is that people should know what they're getting into when they enter into these communities. We've had, I think you'll see a letter of support from the Office of the Attorney General where they kind of list out, they have many, many folks who have contacted them saying, this is an issue, they don't have any recourse. There's no information on people who are smoking in units next to them, and they don't really have anything they can do about it. So this bill kind of creates an outline and creates guidance for people who are dealing with this issue. Would also, just a friendly reminder that this committee unanimously passed this bill last year, and we hope for a favorable report this year. Thank you so much.
Okay, before I recognize the first question, let me just ask this. Is this bill being introduced today exactly as it passed our committee last year?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, first question goes to, I guess that was Delegate Holmes' question. Question goes to Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The cannabis bill that's being introduced, how does this complement or conflict with the language about odor in buildings and common areas and things like that?
No, it's a totally fair question and something that we're looking at, so I'll have to follow up with you on that. Sure, thank you.
Didn't hear the last part of your sentence. What was that?
I just said I'll follow up with the good delegate. Yeah,
all right.
Sorry about that.
Delegate Boyce.
Isn't it so that you could get rents an apartment unit, for instance, that is like smoking or non-smoking?
Correct. I will. That is true. However, I will mention that this bill does not deal with apartments specifically.
So I'm trying to make a point, though.
Okay.
So most dwellings would have their own policy per their owner about whether or not smoking can or cannot be allowed.
Correct. This is for the common ownership group. So if you had a condo board would have to establish this policy.
So I'm reading some of the testimony. It's the opposition is essentially saying that it may be hard to do something like this, and I'm not sure how, considering there are a ton of no smoking or smoking area policies to date, given what we know about secondhand smoke.
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions? We'll go to a virtual witness who signed up favorable with amendment, and that's Vince McAvoy. Vince, are you with us? Nope. No Vince. Okay. We are Vinceless, right? Okay. In that case, we're going to go to the opposition. Bruce Bariano is here.
Thank you so much.
Welcoming back to the committee a friend of many years, for me certainly. Welcome, Mr. Bariano.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. You know I love you dearly. I really dislike this bill. Members of the committee, for the record, Bruce Bariano here on behalf of the tobacco wholesalers in very strong opposition to this bill, which was killed in the Senate last year. It is the exact same bill that came out of here. Please seriously look at the language of this bill. It's broad, it's vague, it's mandatory, and it does also apply to cannabis. This bill applies to cannabis, Delegate Morgan. It's anything you smoke that you light up. So let's look at the bill, okay? It deals with condos. First of all, you go into a condo or a cooperative, you got to look what you're getting into before you buy. You know, a buyer beware. There's some responsibility on people that go into a condo. But it's not just tobacco. It's anything that you can light up that you can exhale, burn, or carry. It's mandatory. It requires that a policy has to be developed and that the policy has to indicate where the locations are where you can and where you can't. In addition, any conditions on the ability in the smoking areas, what areas or what conditions apply there. It's very open-ended, vague, and broad as to what due process the owner of the condo unit has, because they can develop a policy to file a complaint against an individual who violates the policy. So you're leaving it up to them to establish a policy. There's no balance. There's no due process at all. And it's totally vague as to what penalties and fines they can do. It's mandatory that they can do fines and penalties for violating this policy. What amounts? What fines? What policies? You're really delegating enormous authority to people that are living in a multifamily area. And lastly, if I may just take a moment, Mr. Chairman, even worse than that is you're allowing all the municipalities and counties in this state to go beyond this, and say you can't have any smoking area, or we're not going to allow any cannabis smoking. Here you're legalizing cannabis recreationally for adults, and here you're allowing these condo units to ban it, or the localities to ban it in various facilities. All I'm saying is, seriously, read this bill very carefully. Words matter. It's broad, it's vague, and it is beyond any interpretation clearly and specifically. This bill needs a lot of work, and therefore it should wait till next year. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Bariano? Mr. Bariano, I have a kind of a little bit of a broad question, and it's this. I mean, you know, my wife and I, as you know, we sold our homes and we rent an apartment in Rockville.
I visited it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
We actually have the one next door, which is even nicer now. And it's a no-smoking building, and we chose it for that reason. And there's somebody on the third and now on the fourth floor who, the smell of marijuana is now in the building, and they're having to enforce the lease provisions to find the person and to get rid of them, which I hope they're able to do before April. But here's the thing. I mean, obviously, in a condo building, people have as much of a right to buy into a condo building with no smoking as we do, but how would they know going in what if there's no policy, how would they know? How would they be able to make an informed choice of where they want to live if there weren't some sort of a policy?
Well, sincerely, Mr. Chairman, that they would then go to another residential area where there is a policy, or where there is something in the lease or is already in the condo documents. But this is mandating a unit or an owner to do something that has not been done before. I've some condo units, and it's not the easiest thing to live with other people in a common shared property arrangement. And in addition, and I'm not trying to make a joke or anything like that, I mean, I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York, and lived in an apartment all my life. There were smells of food. Forget the marijuana and the smoking that, you know, you didn't want and everything, but it's just part of the reality of living in a unit. But those are things that people ought to look into before they buy something or they rent something. But at the very least, I don't favor it, but at the very least, if you're going to try and do something, you are really turning over all of the fill in the blanks to the condo units or to local government. And I don't think the state legislature should be doing that. If you're going to do a policy, you need to be specific. What amounts are fined? I mean, you read that on page 3, line 5, any penalties or fines for violating this policy. Could be any amount. It could be that you have to leave, or you can't smoke marijuana anymore, even though it's been legalized by the voters and the legislature's going to pass something legalizing it for adults.
Well, I mean, in fairness, we make tobacco, alcohol, and now marijuana legal, but we don't say that you can use it under any circumstance. It's not a civil right.
Yep.
Like, okay, Delegate
But you're
Love,
specific in everything, and you are.
Delegate Love has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Barrano.
Good afternoon.
Two things. One, a moment ago, you said we're mandating people to do something that they've never done before, but that's in fact not correct, because a number, I can tell you several, of governing bodies of common ownership communities have already created these policies. Isn't that correct?
No, I'm aware of that. If I had said that,
Right.
I did not intend to mean that.
Okay,
The point
good,
is,
good.
what you
I
are.
understand. My second question, I understand that you represent the tobacco industry, but what I'm somewhat baffled at is why the strong offense at a policy. We're not mandating in law that they ban smoking, just that they create a policy.
Delegate, I've had the pleasure and the honor. I've never smoked anything in my life, all right? Not even that funny little weed that you all legalized, and I don't intend to. I'm a happy guy. I don't need it. But I'm a very strong believer in civil rights and individual rights. Been a member of the ACLU since high school. And I don't think we ought to be telling people what to do. That is legal and lawful. Now, smoking is legal and lawful in the state of Maryland. That's my premise. And by this, you are the vagueness, Delegate, I'm not being extreme, the vagueness of this is such that you could ban it. You could ban it directly or indirectly in certain facilities. And the people already are living there. And they've been living there for quite a while. So what are they going to do? You're forcing them to move out. You're really intruding in their right to their environment or where they're living. I think people should know what the score is before they go into something. I think this is grossly unfair for people that are living in a premise, and some for quite a while, and you pass something like this, which is mandatory. This is so broad and mandatory. I don't think legislators should be passing such broad mandatory language like this and just abrogating your telling how many penalties, what amount of penalties, what kind of fines. That's why I'm so strong about it. Thank you.
All right, there appear to be no further questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That
Have a good
ends
day,
the
everybody.
public hearing on House Bill 315. I'm going to alter the order of the legislation and go straight to House Bill 608, which is Delegate Lehman's bill having to do with housing discrimination and service dogs and guide dogs, because I see some of our friends have been waiting very patiently here, and some of our pooch friends might need to go for a little walkie poo soon, so you never know.
Mr. Chairman, I've been asking if we could have canine friends in this hearing room, and up till now you had said no. So I'm very, very pleased that they are here.
Wait, hold on. When did
Yes,
I
I have a
ever say
panel of,
anything that was negative
yeah.
with respect to our furry friends? Never. I deny it. I deny it. Okay. Delegate Lehman, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and my esteemed colleagues, for the record, I am Delegate Mary Lehman, pleased to present House Bill 608, prohibiting discrimination against individuals with disabilities who retain their former service or guide dogs after they retire from service. The bill provides that individuals with disabilities shall be exempt from any provision in a lease or a rental agreement that prohibits the keeping of dogs. They will still be held liable for any damage to the premises made by the dog, and at the discretion of the landlord, they may still be required, to pay an additional pet fee. The purpose of the bill is to recognize the assistance that these retired service dogs continue to provide owners even after they no longer work outside the home. The bill prohibits landlords from discriminating against those people with disabilities who retain their retired service dogs. Service dogs provide life-changing assistance to people with a wide range of disabilities, such as mobility issues, sensory issues, including blindness and hearing loss, epilepsy, post-traumatic stress disorder, just to name a few. While many people with disabilities who use service dogs may require a service dog for their whole lives, service dogs only work an average of about 8 years, and eventually they must retire. So this means that for an individual with a disability, they may have several service dogs throughout their lives. But a service dog retiring, quote unquote, the way we think of it with humans, is not the same. And that's because these retired dogs will continue to serve their owners at home. They are so highly trained that they literally cannot turn off their training. Therefore, they will continue to help people with disabilities retain an equal opportunity to use and enjoy a dwelling as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. Additionally, there are often long wait lists to get service dogs, which puts individuals with disabilities at risk of not having any service dog, whether active or retired. So this is particularly a problem if a landlord does not allow a tenant with a disability to keep his or her retired service dog. There are many issues associated with rehoming retired service dogs. First of all, older dogs are much less likely to be adopted. Maryland animal shelters are overwhelmed by the number of animals they receive, and our euthanasia rates, as we discussed recently, are already high. So allowing retired service dogs to be treated as active service dogs, essentially, in terms of housing, would lessen the number of retired guide dogs having to be rehomed or worse, euthanized. Additionally, this bill would spare the owners of retired service dogs the heartbreak of having to part with their service animal. In closing, Mr. Chair, I would just say we have talked recently about the number of bipartisan bills that have been before ENT this session. This service dog legislation may be as bipartisan a bill as we're going to see here. Nearly every member of this committee put their name on the bill. I think 18 of the 23 of us, and I believe the only reason the few that did not is because I didn't have time to approach them. So I ask for a favorable report, and I thank you.
Okay, why don't we go to all the favorable witnesses, and then we'll entertain questions. So next on my list is Lisa Radoff. I know I saw her there someplace. Maryland Votes for Animals. Welcome back, Lisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barve, Vice Chairman Stein, members of the committee. My name is Lisa Radoff. I'm the President and Chairman of Maryland Votes for Animals, and I'm testifying here today in favor of HB 608 for not only Maryland Votes for Animals, but also the Humane Society of the United States. You're going to hear from other witnesses who I think are very qualified to address this issue. I'm just going to say simply that these dogs that undergo such extensive training in their senior years are hardly likely to be destructive or boisterous. So if at any time dogs that have undergone this training are this disciplined, after they've given so much of their lives to perform life-saving services for our friends who are here, et cetera, that's the least that we can do. I ask for a favorable report and don't want to take up more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the following three people signed up to testify in person: Ronza Atman, Terry Nettles, and Mylea Jensen. So who would like to go first? Give us your name and please proceed. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malia Jensen. I'm a former service dog handler who had a working dog for 3.5 years, and unfortunately, due to a traumatic incident that we experienced, his career was cut short, leaving me with no other choice but to retire and rehome him, because at the time, the building that I lived in did not allow large dogs. And this was very hard to do, trying to figure out where he was going to go. And fortunately, at the last minute before I was going to make the decision to send him back to the school, a couple who were friends of mine stepped up and agreed to take him, which was fantastic. But we, as service dog handlers, should not have to rely on last minute 11th hour quick fixes. So I would encourage you to give a favorable report on HB 608. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go next?
Terry.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
There we go.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. And my name is Terry Nettles. I live in Leisure World of Maryland, and I'm hoping that you will vote in favor of this bill of 608. This bill will not only benefit me, but also all persons that have guide dogs, all blind people who have guide dogs. This is my guide dog. His name is Neville, and he and I have been a working teams for almost a year now. He's dog number 7. So ever since 1979, I've had guide dogs, so do the math. Anyway, where I purposely chose to move to Leisure World for a lot of reasons, for its accessibility of getting around and with transportation and whatnot. But currently, the building that, and most of the buildings in Leisure World, they have a weight limit for their dogs, for pets that are 20 pounds. And as you can see, Neville is definitely bigger than 20 pounds. So when his time of retirement comes, currently I have to rehome him or move. And we purchased a condo there, so that would be a hardship to have to move, because I'm planning on keeping him. So I'm just asking that you would please vote in favor of this bill, and I would be able to keep Neville, and other people who have dogs would be able to keep their dogs as well, because it's very important that we can keep them if that is our choice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I was going to ask what his name was if you hadn't told us. And then finally, Ronza Atman. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ronza Othman, and I am president of the National Federation of the Blind of Maryland. NFB of Maryland is the state's oldest and largest organization of and for the blind, low vision, and deaf-blind individuals. We maintain our independence and move about our world safely through the use of both long white canes and guide dogs. The ADA federal housing laws and the Maryland white cane law protect against discrimination for guide dog users in that dogs are not considered pets for purposes of housing if they are active working dogs. But sometimes you have to retire a dog, usually due to age or illness, but they still have several good years in them, but cannot actively be considered guide dogs. There is a loophole in the law that retired guide dogs are not protected, and that no pet laws, or policies rather, and pet fees apply to them in housing. So as you heard, the handler either has to rehome the dog, move, or in some extreme situations, our members have experienced, euthanize the dog. It's hard to rehome an older dog, as you've heard, and it's sometimes impossible to move because the person might be in fixed income housing rent control section 8 here, has with him his retired guide dog Igloo, and as you can tell, the dog is very well behaved. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between whether he was actively working or retired. I'd ask you to look at the written testimony in your packet of Sherry Shurek, who also had to rehome her dog or find another place to live. This was heartbreaking for both Sherry and the dog, who ultimately passed away after a happy living situation could not be found. This is a member of the family, and we shouldn't have to kick them out of our homes because they are old. We wouldn't allow that for anyone else. Thank you very much, and we ask for a favorable report on HB 608.
Thank you. Before I go to questions, I have to say, over the course of my life, I've had 5 dogs. These dogs are better behaved than each one of them. It's not even close. Okay, Delegate Ruth has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true or not, that service dog essentially lets you know when they're ready to retire. I just wondered if you could speak more generally about what would be the conditions or parameters for deciding when a dog is ready to retire and what that looks like.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes a dog can let you know. One of the ways they can let you know that is if they slow down to the point to where the trainers will say the harness is up by their head. Basically, the harness handle is kind of like straight up, and you're pretty much pushing them along because they may slow down. Sometimes it could be because their vision is going. And I had a dog, my second guide, that happened to, where at nighttime it was hard for her to see, and so she was very, very hesitant to work at night, and obviously health issues can certainly do it, but these dogs will work until the bitter end if they can. That's basically like race horses, you know how they're bred to race, the same thing with guide dogs. They're specifically bred for this, and so hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all of you being here. I'm asking this question only because I just don't know. I haven't read the legislation yet. What happens if you have to retire your service animal and you want to keep your service animal, and I understand that, and then you have to get another service animal? Would you then have 2 in the unit, or does the legislation address that? I'm not sure how that would work.
Thank you, Delegate. That's a great question. The legislation doesn't specifically address that. It does happen, but it doesn't happen very often because of the long wait times to get a successor dog. And also because of the, as Terry said, the dogs want to work as long as they can. So it could happen. The legislation is silent on this, but it is not likely to happen very frequently.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
All right, there appear to be no further questions. Thank you very much. None of the typical real property opponents are opposed to this bill. So any case, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 608. Let's go to House Bill 338, Delegate Boyce. And this is another bill that has no opponents.
Panelists, thank you so much. I should give them time to.
I was going to say that
I'll give them time.
I'm very impressed at how quietly they're leaving, unlike most groups of people. So kudos to you for really helping our committee work properly.
I can't compete with this. I know.
I want to pet the dog so bad, but it's
I
a
know.
no-no.
I know.
I
yeah.
do pet the dog in the State House, which is kind of fun.
I think they've trained them to be used to that because they know there's no
But the
saying
dog's
no
like
to
putting
the
his
likes of
face
us.
in. It's like, I do want to pet you, but I can't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, Delegate
Thank you
Boyce.
so much, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the best committee in the House, Environment and Transportation. For the record, I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, presenting HB 338, Baltimore City Commercial Use Definition. The bill expands the current state law to allow multifamily and residential development to be created, and in this case, for the successful redevelopment of projects such as Baltimore's Inner Harbor. This legislation will ensure the state's interest in promoting tourism, a clean harbor, and the healthy Chesapeake Bay that are protected and appropriately represented as major drivers of the state's economy. There's more to this, but I'm going to turn it over to my panelists, and thank you for your time and consideration of HB 338.
Okay, and please give us your name and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Caroline Hecker. I'm an attorney with the law firm Rosenberg, Martin, Greenberg in Baltimore, and I represent the developer of Harbor Place. I'm here in support of the bill, and as Delegate Boyce said, the purpose of the bill is to confirm the state's support for the mixed-use redevelopment along Baltimore's waterfront, particularly where it's in close proximity to transit. The bill in no way interferes with Baltimore City's local zoning authority. Any development project would still go through a rigorous design review and entitlement process through the city's ordinary process of the Planning Commission, City Council, Zoning Board review. The bill simply expresses and reinforces the state's interest in the revitalization of the waterfront through mixed-use development by clarifying that commercial use includes multifamily development, particularly where it's proximate to transit. I'm happy to answer any other questions the committee may have, but I would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
We've got a number of other people who are signed up to testify, Lisa Jones and Grayson Wiggins. I don't see either of them.
So yeah, they are playing the game of I'm the panelist for 3 bills that are being presented at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay, Delegate Holmes has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this. I'm just curious, why can't the city do this in their zoning regulations already? Why do we need the bill? Why can't
If I may answer
Yes,
that.
yes.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. The city can and will do this in its zoning regulations. The purpose of the bill is to confirm that the state supports a mixed-use redevelopment of the Inner Harbor. It's a little bit of a belt and suspenders. The word commercial sometimes implies only commercial uses, and we want to ensure that it also encompasses multifamily redevelopment.
So the city can, in fact, do this now?
Yes.
Is the city going to do this?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to just add to, as you know, the pandemic has kind of revealed a lot, not only how we shop, how we go about our day-to-day, and the downtown Harbor Place has changed dramatically, and a lot of, I would say, anchor establishments have left. And so this is also a tool to say between the state and the city, how do we reimagine downtown beyond what it used to be, right? It's a place where you would go eat, maybe you walk the promenade, but not so much so, oh, she's back from her ping pong game. But not so much so now. And so now we have someone who's young, who is ambitious, who's done projects all over the country, who's a native Baltimorean, who has bought it. And now it's the question is what do we do? What does this look like? And what is essentially sustainable for the next, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, given what we've been through and given some of the decline that we've seen down at the harbor.
Thank you.
By Lisa Harris Jones. So why don't you give us your 2 minutes and we'll go to questions.
Okay, what did they say? I just
They told us to move unfavorable. Just joking.
well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I like to make a motion to move favorable on this bill. I don't know. I'll take questions. I don't know what they said. I'm sure they said it all. It's a pretty straight to the point piece of legislation.
Okay, the first question goes to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Delegate Boyce and the panel, just to be clear, this in no way trumps the so to speak. You have to watch using that word these days. This in no way trumps the city's right to zone.
Not at all.
Right.
Around waterfront.
So for instance, the project, whatever it becomes, would still have to go through the city like planning and zoning.
Absolutely.
Okay,
process.
thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but this is doing it by changing the definition of house, am I, right, so if it's in their code already.
Now, go ahead.
It's not currently defined in the code, commercial, and so when we talk about a property like the Inner Harbor, it has commercial zoning, and so the question is, what does that mean? Does commercial zoning include residential zoning in the context of a multifamily apartment building, for instance, that has ground floor retail? And we want to clarify that from the state's perspective, the state supports the redevelopment of commercial properties in proximity to transit. That was the attempt to sort of narrow the geographic field. But where where we have commercial use, that it can also include multifamily.
Right. But then anywhere it says commercial, and I'm sorry if I'm missing understanding, but so anywhere it says commercial now, it essentially changes what their code says.
It doesn't change what the city zoning code says at all. It just addresses from a state law perspective what commercial use is.
So, if I may, so we've worked very closely with Baltimore City and their vice president of economic development on the language within this bill, and I think it was probably pointed out that specific to the Inner Harbor, there's 3 layers of, there's the general zoning related to the Inner Harbor, there's an urban renewal plan related to the Inner Harbor, and then within the city's charter, there's a very specific section that speaks to the Inner Harbor. And that's where the concern is with the definition of commercial use. So in working with City Hall, with the delegate and DLS, we were able to narrow the language of this bill to be very specific to the Inner Harbor, to the point where there's been others that have reached out and to talk to us about the bill. And when they really read it and saw that there was a reason why within transit, I think it's 0.5 miles. It's very narrowed and pinpointed to the Inner Harbor to address that issue of the definition of commercial use.
Okay, so, and actually I think that's great that it's narrowed that way, because I think it's important. It sounds like you're doing something really important, and it also sounds like, but if it, okay, I think I understand. If it, otherwise, it might change what the code says, because it's only applying to, no?
Now, I mean, it's a very tiny bill that took months and months to get right.
Yeah, like I said,
it would not have the problems that you are pointing as could be concerns. So we made a point to make sure it would not change zoning in other areas other than the Inner Harbor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the second bite at the apple. Is the city currently redefining commercial use to match the definition of commercial use in this legislation?
No.
In the city zoning code, commercial use already encompasses mixed use multifamily.
So currently, the city's definition of commercial use is exactly the same as what's in this bill.
It's very similar. It's not exactly the same, but it doesn't. The city's definition doesn't have the transit component.
Okay, and I'm just trying to I'm just trying to wrap my arms around the need for this. That's all. So if the city's current commercial use is very similar to this, then
because there's a charter in the city's charter, there's language that speaks directly to the Inner Harbor, which makes it very unique. So this bill was meant to address that specific definition of commercial use that's sitting in the city charter that's different than the overall zoning and the urban renewal plan. There's all these different layers very specific to the area that we intend to redevelop. And so we have to tweak this part to make the others fall in place, if that makes sense. It's like 3 different layers, and we're trying to get to this first layer of cleaning up the definition of commercial use that's specific to the inner harbor that was probably done in the 1970s, back when the harbor was first developed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there appear to be no further questions. So thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 338. Let's proceed to House Bill 425 rather. Delegate Taylor, new to the committee, welcome. Another bill with no opponents. Welcome to the Environment and Transportation Committee.
Thank you. So good afternoon, Chair Barvey and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Kim Taylor, representing Prince George's County's District 23. I am asking for support for HB 425, a bill that tightens up the language in Maryland's code that deals with land installment contracts. Land installment contracts are private, informal agreements that are often the only choice for home ownership for individuals who are credit challenged or are facing an emergency housing crisis. A land installment contract is like a mortgage, but instead of using a lender, the seller finances the buyer. The buyer takes over the property management, repairs, and makes payments to the seller until they reach the agreed upon purchase price. So clearly, there are benefits to both parties. However, historically, these contracts have been associated with predatory selling practices that exploit vulnerable and unsophisticated buyers. Fortunately, Maryland's current regulation framework provides some protections for buyers. However, there remain some critical gaps that expose land installment contract buyers to abusive sellers. HB 25 addresses these gaps by requiring provisions like having the buyer and seller sign, date, and receive copies of the executed contract, ensuring the seller completes a title search and discloses the findings, and including the physical address of the property and in the contract and on any receipts. So in short, strengthening the language to close these gaps will help protect vulnerable home buyers. With that, I urge a favorable report to adopt 425, HB 425.
Okay, we've got 4 virtual witnesses, so we'll go through them and then we'll entertain questions. First one is Mayor Sarah Franklin. Mayor Franklin, are you with us? Nope. Okay. How about Jana Parker? Nope. I saw Evelyn Zwiebach, though. Evelyn, are you with us? Yes, she is. Welcome to the committee. Give us your name for the record and please proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Evelyn Zwiebach for the record, and I'm testifying on behalf of Enterprise Community Partners in support of House Bill 425. Founded 40 years ago in Maryland, Enterprise is a national nonprofit that exists to make a good home possible for the millions of families without home. I am based in Enterprise's Detroit market office, where I lead our programs and policy work. One of my primary areas of research has been making land installment contracts a safer and more effective home ownership tool. In partnership with my collaborators at University of Michigan, I published a policy brief in May 2021 on land installment contract reform, which I submitted as written testimony. As we outline in the brief, land installment contracts have historically been associated with exploitative practices, but they are not inherently predatory. Instead, they have features that make them ripe for abuse by bad faith sellers. Abuse can be prevented by enacting strategic reforms that 1, strengthen existing regulatory guardrails, and 2, eliminate information imbalances between the contract parties. HB 425 proposes to do just that. It creates a stronger record of the agreement by requiring buyers and sellers to sign, date, and receive copies of the executed contract. It brings greater clarity to the terms of the agreement through inclusion of the physical address of the property, rights of the buyer and seller to cure a default, details on payment, due dates, and what the payments cover, and more. It also enables buyers to make informed decisions by requiring sellers to complete a title search, share the findings with the buyer, and provide a separate notice if title to the property is not clear. HB 425 proposes to make changes that prevent abuse while still ensuring good faith actors can use land installment contracts with ease and efficiency. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have and appreciate your consideration of these rules.
Thank you very much. Let's proceed to Veranda Williams, who I also saw briefly. Ms. Williams, welcome to the committee. And there she is. Ms. Williams, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am in support of Delegate Kim Taylor's HB 425, the real property land installment contracts, requirements, and vendors' duties and responsibilities, because it provides a solid protections for both parties to the transaction. For the buyer, first, it protects them from predatory sellers who may take advantage of buyers who are unfamiliar with the process. These contracts should be prepared by a licensed attorney who is familiar with land installment process, and signed copies should be provided to both parties to review and have their own legal representation reviewed if they do not clearly understand the terms contained therein. Secondly, the title search should be provided to the buyer prior to consummating the transaction so that any questions may be addressed before the deal is finalized. And thirdly, the physical address must be clearly identified in the agreement, and the buyers should be afforded an opportunity to view the property and have the home inspection completed, with the opportunity to withdraw from the contract without penalty if there are any findings that they are not completely satisfied with. For the seller, it will provide an opportunity to sell a property that is not sold in the traditional home sale market, and it will also remove the possibility of being under suspicion of questionable business practices and or taking advantage of innocent buyers who are unfamiliar with this untraditional home purchase option. I encourage you to support House Bill 425 presented by Delegate Kim Taylor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor or either of the witnesses? Well, you get off easy on this one, Delegate Taylor. Go for it.
Delegate Taylor,
Yes, sir.
what district are you in?
District 23, the best district in Prince George's County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, you're about to learn a hard political lesson here.
Wait.
I do have a question, actually. Thank you very much. And I don't begrudge Delegate. She did used to work for District 22 at one time.
I did.
But my question really is about, have you seen the testimony from the department?
Of DHCD?
Yeah.
I have not.
Okay. So then I will talk to you offline and see what.
But I have talked to them.
Okay,
So
well,
I've not seen their written
they
testimony, but
wanted
we've
an
had
amendment,
conversations.
so if you, we'll talk about it offline.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Sure.
All righty then. Well, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 425. Let's proceed to House Bill 460. Regrettably, not one with no opponents, but please proceed, Delegate. You have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thanks again, Chair Barvey. For the record, again, I am Delegate Kim Taylor, representing Prince George's County District 23. I'm excited to present HB 460, which is a bill that requires the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD, conduct an annual racial equity impact assessment. This assessment must be made available to the public, and the first assessment shall be completed by December 31st, 2024. This annual assessment must evaluate 2 things: the impact of the financial assistance administered by DHCD on racial minorities, and whether the financial assistance administered by DHCD is equitably invested in communities with the largest need and those with the largest populations of economically marginalized people. As you're probably aware, some of the financial assistance programs administered by DHCD are the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the Homeowner Assistance Program. the Homelessness Solutions Program, the Home Repairs and the Energy Assistance Improvement Program. And on their website, you can find this information and also DHCD's 2015 to 2022 Agency Impact Report. Now, this report includes a myriad of statistics about DHCD's investments in affordable housing, energy efficiency, neighborhood revitalization, broadband connectivity, and affordable units for those with disabilities, but there's no mention or breakdown of racial minority investment. Also, we're asking to create the racial equity impact assessment. DHCD must engage with an independent expert to develop a rigorous rubric that would result in generating a fair, unbiased, and balanced valuation of the impact of financial assistance on racial minorities. And with that, colleagues, I respectfully seek support on this important bill. Thank you.
Okay, so we have two people who are signed up in person. We'll go to them first, and then we will go through all of the virtual supporters. So let's first go to Claudia Wilson Randall and Brian Sims. Yep, that's it. Okay, please.
Good afternoon again. My name is Claudia Wilson Randall. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. And I just want to speak in support of House Bill 460. I want to say that you have my written testimony, but I am surprised this isn't already being done. I think it is critical that we have measures and assessment and analysis about the racial impact of the investment of the Department of Housing and Community Development. I also want to urge this committee and the legislative body in general to have the Department of Housing and Community Development collaborate with other agencies. As I have spoken before, the need for us to look at health disparities, social determinants of health will cut across agencies. So the Department of Housing and Community Development, when they do a racial impact assessment, that has an impact on health. We see a lot of the same patterns as we do mapping, investment mapping, and so it's important that we have a chance to, that I would say research institutions have the chance to take a look at their investment strategy. There's certainly a lot of interconnection between health, access to transportation, access to education, employment, economic stability, housing. And so I would urge your favorable report on House Bill 460 and look forward to any questions.
Okay, Mr. Sims.
Good afternoon, Chair Barvey and Vice Chair Stein. My name is Brian Sims. I'm the Vice President of Quality and Equity at the Maryland Hospital Association. And on behalf of our 60 hospital members and health systems, I'm glad to comment in support of House Bill 60. Now, some of you may be wondering, what is the Hospital Association doing here? Well, in addition to the care that our hospitals provide around the clock, we are continuously evaluating ways that we can both improve the health of the people we serve inside and outside of our hospitals. And it is undeniable that equal access to quality and affordable housing is directly correlated with health outcomes. And therefore, it should be no surprise that areas with the greatest health needs and the greatest health disparities in outcomes are also areas that have historically been denied equitable investment and adequate assistance to stem that generational social and economic adversity. Now, we are proud that Maryland is often and consistently identified as one of the richest states in the nation. However, we know that we also have the dubious distinction of some of the greatest rates of income inequality. And so to fully address the systemic issues facing many of Maryland's communities and meaningfully improve the health of all Marylanders, issues beyond direct medical care must be addressed. And so environmental, economic, and social factors, they all play a role in determining health outcomes. And so the assessments that will be required by this bill represent a systematic approach to addressing inequities in access to care and life-enhancing resources. And so findings from these assessments are critical towards generating solutions that really seek to address the adverse health impacts related to systemic inequality and inequity. And so for those reasons, we urge a favorable report on House Bill 460. Thank you.
Okay, let's turn to some of the virtual witnesses. Is Albert Turner with us? Okay, Mr. Turner, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, delegates. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this bill. My name is Albert Turner. I am an attorney in the Human Right to Housing Division of the Public Justice Center in Baltimore, as well as a member of the Baltimore United and Renters United Maryland. Public Justice Center, PJC, we are a nonprofit, and we stand with tenants, and we work with them to protect and expand their rights to safe, habitable, affordable, and non-discriminatory housing. And we fight for their rights to fair and equal treatment in Maryland in regards to landlord-tenant laws, courts, and agencies. We're here because we believe that House Bill 460 is a critical measure to address the racial disparity in access to safe and stable housing and promoting racial justice. We believe requiring an annual race equity impact assessment is a first step to achieving those goals. Racial equity in how housing services are administered is an important step in addressing the racist history of the state of Maryland and the United States when it comes to housing. Racist zoning, development planning, as well as exclusionary private covenants have led to the disenfranchisement of thousands of Black people, poor people, disabled people, and other racial, ethnic, and religious minorities. We cannot know how to fix these deeply entrenched issues without necessary data to know where the issues specifically lie, and we believe House Bill 460 would step in to help begin fixing that issue. House Bill 460 provides the state and DHCD the necessary tools to know whether the agency's spending has been equitable and has affirmatively furthered fair housing and race equity in the state. In our written testimony, we provided some reports that have been done prior that showed that the state has an affordability gap, providing affordable rental housing, and that gap has mainly affected minorities, poor families, and disabled. We believe House Bill 460 will guide the department on how to begin fixing these rampant issues and also provide transparency. Thank you for this time, and we ask the committee issue a favorable report on House Bill 460.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering if either Mayor Sarah Franklin or Jana Parker are with us. Still not? Okay. Veranda Williams, however, I bet is, since she was here earlier. Ms. Williams? Okay. Well, in that case, we're going to go to questions. Delegate Ruth has a question. Oh, wait, here she is. Yes, Ms. Williams, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm in support of House Bill 460 because it supports the stability and growth of a segment of our community that has been negatively impacted recently. The housing assistance programs provided available through the DHCD are available to qualified residents. However, creating an annual racial equity impact assessment as suggested would positively help to measure the impact of housing programs and helping to increase home ownership in populations that traditionally may not have had the opportunity to own homes without the assistance. For most families, home ownership is the beginning of generational wealth for their home, and home ownership is also a factor in stabilizing community and creating favorable student performance. It has also many other social impacts on communities of color, and which also translates to communities throughout the state. And I would favorably suggest that you consider passing House Bill 460. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill. And I think it was Claudia who said you were surprised it wasn't already happening. I'm surprised as well that this is not already something that's being done. And as somebody with an IT background, data and analysis are very important. And as you say, we have to have the data before, so that we can know how to address issues. I just was curious, I assume that there are federally funded DHCD programs and would be subject to Title VI. And I just wondered how this might intersect with, if there is an intersection with Title VI, or if Title VI has any requirements in terms of equity analysis for housing. Does anybody know? Or sorry, that may be too.
Who would be familiar with Title VI?
I come from I've worked with Title VI requirements on transit, and so I was just wondering what the equivalent would be in housing, but that's fine if you don't know. I was just curious. Thank you.
Delegate Ruth, we can talk about it later. We can explore it. I'd look forward to learning more about Title VI.
Absolutely.
There is some.
Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, of course. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions for the sponsor or her witnesses? Seeing none, we're going to go to one person signed up in opposition and another person is signed up informationally. So let's go to the opponent, who is virtual. His name is Vince McAvoy. Mr. McAvoy, you have the floor for 2 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Delegate. Thank you, committee. If you go to the CHD website, what you're going to see is that they have programs to assist home buyers and homeowners. That's not to say that every citizen in Maryland wants to be a homeowner or a home buyer. But they have numerous programs, and they've had numerous programs for at least 40 years, probably more. I can speak to Baltimore City, where I live, where we've had assistance of $1. It just doesn't get better than that. Take ownership of your home in Baltimore for $1. We had that. We have empowerment zones. And I want to say that beyond that, in secondary marketing and loans, which is something I have experience with, we package those things according to different economic factors, the resale rates, the chances of those loans going down. And they're built so that if one defaults on a loan, the entire pool of packages for that loan package doesn't become an unworthy investment, which is to say that we have systems in place and have had systems in place. In another committee just about an hour ago, there was discussion about getting people to buy into these locales when they don't want to, and Chinese are jumping in. There are other steps that we should be taking. The reason I'm against this from a racial perspective is, number one, it's flawed. Right now, whites are a minority, non-whites are a majority in the state. There's no mention of that in the bill. Number two, when you're looking at these economic and social issues, that's far a piece from what CHD does. And I want to say that CHD is not the only thing. We have a lot of veterans in the state of Maryland, and they also get benefits. I am against this bill. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We also have signed up Anthony Fiano. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You're signed up to testify informationally, neither for nor against. Mr. Fiano, are you with us? Nope. Okay, that ends the, well, actually, first, any questions for the opponent? Seeing none, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 460. You've had a relatively successful introductory exposure to our committee. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, let's go to House Bill 501, Delegate Queen. Oh, okay. Didn't even notice you back there. Yet another bill with no opponents.
What?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We have the panel. I actually had
Yeah, Bob said he was coming.
Bob Enton here, and this will be the first time in life I've had Marceline White and Bob
Oh my
Enton
God.
on the same panel.
I know.
Oh, where is he? This is
Where
a
did he
photograph
go?
for the ages. Oh, God.
He was out there waiting. I don't know what happened. I was like,
Here, all right, you need to sit up there right now, Bob, so that we can take a photograph of the three of you.
with you and Marceline.
The rare occurrence.
The rare occurrence.
Okay, Delegate Queen, you.
Thank you so much. Well, greetings, Chair Barvey and Vice Chair Stein, and the most friendly and the most astute members of the General Assembly, the Environmental and Transportation Committee. How are you? So HB 501, Revitalizing Neighborhoods Through Home Ownership Program and Fund Establishment, is patterned after the HUD's Dollar Home Initiative that helps local governments to foster home ownership opportunities for low to moderate income families, addresses community blight from abandoned homes, and offers the purchase of qualified HUD homes to local families. This is a successful program that addresses many of the problems that vacant homes cause to our community. That is crime and fires and loss of income from tax revenue. And also it deteriorates the value of surrounding homes. So HB 501 would provide state matching funds to supplement any federal or local programs that are designed to rehabilitate and resell abandoned residential homes to low to moderate income families. In the first quarter of 2022, foreclosures rates in Maryland increased by 6.8 foreclosures per 10,000 households, resulting in Maryland's foreclosure rate being the 10th highest in the nation. And so for this program, this would help low-income families have a pathway to home ownership and to get out of poverty. And you just heard from the other bill about the importance of home ownership to our communities. And this provides stability for individuals and families in our community. And so I seek a favorable recommendation for HB 501. This is a win-win for individuals personally, Maryland families totally, and for our economy. Thank you. Marceline, you want to start?
Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marceline White. I'm the Executive Director of Economic Action Maryland. Economic Action works on housing justice, economic rights, and equity through research, education, policy advocacy, and direct service. And we're here in strong support of House Bill 501, and I want to thank Delegate Queen for offering it. Just to note while we're here, because of our mission, this bill accomplishes all three things. In terms of economic rights is inextricably linked to homeownership. In fact, we found that homeownership is one of the key ways that working families can build wealth across the country and in our state. And we found that they can borrow against it for the retirement fund, they build home equity, they can use it in terms of access to credit, and it's a form of intergenerational wealth that they pass down to their children in many of our communities. So it's critically important to wealth building. It also has a range of impacts in terms of increased civic engagement, benefits to children in terms of educational attainment and health outcomes. So there are a number of reasons why homeownership is important. Today in Maryland, there is a housing gap. You've heard about it all day. I will say the Urban Institute showed that in Maryland today, white households tend to have and own homes at a rate that's at least 20% more than majority Black and Hispanic households. So to help close that gap, this bill would provide stacking funding on top of the HUD funding so that we could take vacant homes, rehabilitate them, and provide support for low income and moderate income families to move in. So for all of these reasons, we support House Bill 501 and ask for a favorable report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association in support of this legislation. You know, one of the things that never ceases to amaze me is that the state of Maryland is sitting on roughly $200 million of mortgage assistance money from the federal government that has not been distributed. It's just amazing to me. The program has really not worked. And when I look at the fiscal note on this bill, it's about $2.5 million a year. And I wonder if we couldn't take some of that money and use it for this program. It's just sitting there. And, you know, people need it. The last thing, and you've heard me say this year after year, going back to, I guess, for those of you who have been here a while, back to 2007, 2008, when the bottom fell out of the real estate market and foreclosures did spike up, the last thing any lender ever wants to do is foreclose. And that's why we haven't fought over the years with the changes in the foreclosure law that have extended the period of time, that call for counseling, that call for mediation, that require a loss mitigation affidavit. All those things we've not opposed because we don't want to have a foreclosure. We don't want to see a foreclosure. We lose money when those properties go to sale. So that's something that, we support this idea. We think it's a great idea. We think there is a need for it. And I would ask the committee and maybe work with staff and with Ms. White and with the sponsor to find, just what's happening with the money that's sitting there in the Mortgage Assistance Fund and what can we do to utilize that money to address these issues. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but we think this is a bill that goes in the right direction. Thank you.
Claudia?
Good afternoon, Claudia Wilson Randall, Community Development Network of Maryland. I'm here to speak on behalf in favor of House Bill 501, and thank you, Delegate Queen, for introducing this bill. You have my written testimony, but a couple of points that I just want to make. The overall mortgage assistance, I think this bill seeks to revitalize neighborhoods. So one of the things that we need to think about is how we target assistance and mortgage assistance to the areas that need it, and to areas where the homeownership rate is low, right? So really using that instrument to target assistance. And then the other piece that my colleague had already spoken about is the need to target it towards people who are making $75,000 or less in the state of Maryland. I know we have a lot of jargon talk about AMI, area median income, but I think it's just really critical that the state think very specifically about what needs to be done in order to help really middle income folks own their first home. And we have many of those people are Black and brown in the state of Maryland. So really figuring out how we move a group from renting, lifetime renting, to home ownership is critical for our state and is critical for the growth of our state. And finally, I just want to say that I think that this sort of need for innovation, taking HUD homes and adding an additional subsidy is a really good idea. And we're going to need innovation around just getting more houses in the state of Maryland that are habitable. So thank you so much for your time today. And I urge your favorable report for House Bill 501.
Thank you. Delegate Foley has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For Delegate Queen. First, Delegate, thank you for bringing this bill. I think this is great, and we do need to tackle our housing problems here in the state. This is a good way to do it. But I want to be clear on, I just have some questions about how the fund will operate. So this would be a fund that would lend money to political subdivisions like cities or whatever, and then they would use it to offer housing, to renovate and offer housing to individuals. Is that correct? Or does it work differently than I described?
The program, so the HUD dollar program is already existing. So the municipalities or the jurisdictions would have to already participate in that program. Okay. And so there are requirements under that program in terms of what type of housing is available. And then we would match that from the state. So it goes to, the program allows for individuals to do the development and also could allow for an organization that does, building houses for individuals to do it as well.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, a follow-up. So the $25,000 loan, that's per unit?
That's per unit, which HUD provides already.
Okay, thank you.
Up to that amount, and then we would match up to that amount.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I've got a question for Bob, just to follow up your comment that there's $200 million of unused mortgage assistance money that the state is sitting on. Maybe could you amplify on that a little bit? Is this recent COVID relief-related money that has not been used, or?
I think this is money that came from the federal government over the last couple of years to, when we had it on COVID, federal money became available for mortgage assistance. And in speaking to the housing department, I don't have my note with me today. I don't know if it was 100 and if it started out at 300, around 300 million, and today it's at 179 or 200. I can get you the exact number. I have it in my notes.
Are you talking about the homeowners assistance fund,
Yeah,
HAF
right,
program?
MHAF,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a huge chunk of money that's been sitting there that has never been distributed. And I'm not that familiar with the limitations on its use and whether it can be shifted in, from one, say, program to another. But I think it's something that we should take a look at and get an update on. But that was a number that I spoke to in another bill hearing. Maybe it was in judiciary. And I have it in my notes on that bill, but it's clearly something that ought to be looked into.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you do have additional information that you can forward to us, so
Sure.
we can follow
You can
up
reach
with
out to Hunter
DHCD.
Pickles. Hunter Pickles is still with DHCD and
Yes.
covering Annapolis for them, so.
Okay, we have a question from Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the same topic, really, isn't that one-time money, and this is an ongoing program that you want to start?
I'm sorry, could you speak louder?
Okay, I thought that was one-time money. Once that money's gone, it's gone, and this would be an ongoing program. So
I thought
I
about
wonder
that.
how that would be squared.
Well, look, I've thought about that, and maybe that money could be used, to purchase, to set up a bond program. It's money that could be maybe, invested, and the earnings on that investment
just
could
need to
help to
look into
fund
it
this. I
further.
just think it's something we ought to take a look at and try to figure out if we can use a chunk of that money, because it's not been going out to homeowners or borrowers.
Okay, there are no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
ends the bill hearing on House Bill 501.
Thank you.
Next, we'll turn to Delegate Holmes, House Bill 532.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the esteemed ENT Committee. For the record, my name is Marvin Holmes, and before you now is HB 532. 532. At the very beginning, ladies and gentlemen, I want to preface this conversation with this is strictly a policy decision that I think needs to be made relevant to the common ownership community discussions in general. The reason for this bill initially was because there are, as you all know, in terms of the common ownership community, at least three different statutes. There's condominiums, there's HOAs, and then there are the cooperatives. What this bill is intended to do is to mirror what takes place in condominiums. Currently in a condominium, condominiums can assess fines within their condominium associations. A homeowners association cannot do the same thing. And so what this bill is attempting to do is to give homeowners associations the same right within their governing documents as does, to give homeowners associations the same rights as does condominiums. I recognize that there is some concern about this piece of legislation, and I understand that totally. That is, if I can kind of go off topic for a second, I think this is one of the reasons why the previous discussions we've had last week about a task force for common ownership communities is significantly necessary. In the task force bill, it talks about attempting to mirror these acts together and finding the differences between the two. This bill, ladies and gentlemen, is simply to have HOAs the same rights within their common ownership community as does condominiums. And as I indicated at the top, I recognize that there is some concern about this piece of legislation. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will terminate my discussion.
Okay. Do we have Kathleen Elmore here? Apparently not. Okay, any questions for the sponsor of the bill? What? Yeah. No, oh, you're right. Pardon me. Is Stephen Randall here with us?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome virtually to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I represent the Maryland Legislative Action Committee. I chair it for the Community Association Institute. We represent about 1 million Marylanders who live in community associations of the three types that Delegate Holmes referenced: HOAs, condos, and cooperatives. That's really about 400,000 homes, but it's almost 7,000 different associations. And those associations are run by volunteer board members who number almost 35,000 volunteers across the state. And they spend almost $2 billion a year to maintain their communities. This bill would fix a gap that's presently in the HOA Act by authorizing those communities to levy reasonable fines. The right for a due process is already contained in both bills. In the HOA Act, it's section 11B 111.1, and this would make it mirror the Condo Act, and it would allow a less costly way to enforce the rules, the bylaws, the declaration in the community, instead of having to take those people who are trying to burden others by creating problems and not following the rules, instead of having to take them to court, which costs everybody and pleases no one. This would allow for fines to enforce the kind of behavior that one or two individuals within a community decide that they don't want to follow the same rules as everyone else. It creates an unequitable situation and puts more burden against those who are following it. So we urge a favorable report on HB 532 on behalf of the Community Association Institute.
Okay, we have a question. Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was just looking at the letter from the Office of the Attorney General, Consumer Protection Division, and I wondered if you could comment on their concern that it could lead to discriminatory levying of fines. I could imagine things like trying to get rid of a house that is not owner occupied, or trying to, you know, if there are people who just sort of culturally don't fit in. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I don't think that this particular piece of legislation would go as far as any of the cultural discussions at all. The legislation that is before you now simply mirrors the ability of a condominium association to levy fines. And in the bill, there will be outlined several different steps that must be taken prior to levying a fine. There's got to be notifications. There has to be an opportunity for someone to be in a hearing to dispute the findings of the HOA. So there are steps where lot owners, lot owners are called in HOA, where lot owners can defend themselves and have their voices heard in an HOA prior to a fine being assessed, if it goes that far.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the sponsor or his witnesses? Seeing none, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 532. Let's proceed to House Bill 534, also Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Delegate Marvin Holmes, and all of you are very familiar, I'm sure, with the legislation that was passed last year relevant to reserve studies and reserve funds. I'm going to make a quote from my grandfather, if you may allow me, Mr. Chair. My grandfather used to always tell me, boy, you got to be more specific in your specificity. When I created the reserve funding account legislation last year, I required reserve funding studies to be done. But I was not specific in my specificity, Mr. Chair. I did not say you had to put money in the bank to put in as required by the reserve fund. This bill simply says if the study requires that you have money in the bank, you have to put the money in the bank and deposit the money. You have to deposit the money. I'm now, Mr. Chair, trying to be specific. Thank you very much.
So little collections of balls of string and lint and maybe bus tokens, that doesn't count.
Spoken like a true accountant, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let's go to Scott Grayson Wiggins. Grayson, are you here? I don't see him. Okay, let's go virtually to Scott Silverman with the Thomas Shield Law Group. Scott, I saw you there there you are.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify on behalf of this bill and in favor of it. My name is Scott Silverman. I'm a community association lawyer, have been so for now more than 25 years. In fairness to Delegate Holmes, the predecessors to his legislation, the statewide bill, the ones that were applicable in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, respectively, also did not contain any requirement to actually put the money in the bank. So the fact that the statewide bill didn't do so either is not necessarily entirely his fault. But what we've come to realize in the years since the statewide bill passed, through conversations with our constituents, is that we need to make a couple tweaks. One of them is to actually make an affirmative requirement that the money be deposited into the reserve account. Currently, the legislation only requires that the budget call for funding, but not for the money to actually be deposited. The other is to change the 3-year ramp-up grace period for initial reserve studies from 3 years to 5 years, since we have heard from our constituents when they receive that initial reserve study, it can often take more than 3 years for them to get a full funding level because of the increase in assessments that will be necessary to accomplish that. And it's particularly in the wake of rising inflation and costs everywhere else, that additional financial relief has unfortunately become necessary. So in closing, CAI, on whose behalf I speak, ask for a favorable recommendation on 534.
All righty then. Any questions for the sponsor and his witness? Well, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
This should teach all of you. Be specific in your specificity.
That's right. Okay, thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 534. Let's proceed to the last bill of the afternoon. House Bill 576 is Delegate Robin Lewis with us. Back to your home committee. Robin.
It's always wonderful to be back. You guys have improved the lighting in here.
Yeah.
Hopefully it enhances both of my good sides. So Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. If, with your indulgence, I'd like to bring up my panel.
Sure, of course.
That includes Mr. Ehrenberg, Ms. Claudia, and come on up, if you can, if it's all right, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ehrenberg?
A-
And Ms.
Ehrenberg, right.
Melanie.
There's also Kimberly Min and Peter, well, whatever. You bring up whoever you want to bring up.
Yeah, we'll take turns.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, esteemed members of the Environment Transportation Committee, members old and new. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Delegate Robin Lewis on behalf of House Bill 567. This is a bill that will make it easier for people in Maryland to afford homes. This is a bill that makes the creation of affordable housing less onerous by focusing on land trust organizations, that is, organizations created under the State Affordable Housing Land Trust Act, to acquire, develop, and make new housing available. I think the idea is something you all could get behind. The mechanism is going to need a little bit of explaining. I spent 2 years on this committee, but somehow I'm still not an expert in real estate law, Delegate Holmes. So I'm going to have my expert and wonderful panelists help out. But here's the idea. This bill will exempt affordable housing land trust organizations from the provisions in state law that drive up the cost of development. By doing so, it basically means that land trust organizations are free of the onerous ground lease rules that just jack up the cost of turning land into housing. So I'm going to thank you for your attention and turn the microphone over to my panelists. And do you have a preferred order, sir?
Nope.
Mr. Chair?
Nope.
I think I'll
whatever.
start with Claude. Start with, okay. I'm going to start with Mr. Ehrenberg, and if you would give me
Okay,
your name.
sounds great. Mr. Ehrenberg, welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman Barve and members of the committee. My name is Daniel Ehrenberg, and I'm a board member of the Community Development Network of Maryland, and I'm also an affordable housing attorney that works with affordable housing land trusts in Maryland and elsewhere. I first want to thank the sponsor, Delegate Lewis, for introducing the bill. The bill, as Delegate Lewis said, would provide immense help to affordable housing land trusts in fulfilling their mission of providing affordable housing in perpetuity to low and moderate income families who otherwise would not be able to purchase a home. This is really a technical amendment to the original Affordable Housing Land Trust Act that was enacted in 2010. In Maryland, because ground leases are disfavored and can be redeemed, the ownership and use of an affordable housing land trust by an affordable housing land trust was exempted from the restrictions placed upon ground leases. The purpose of the land trusts are to own land and lease it pursuant to a 99-year renewable term so that a low and moderate income family can purchase a home that they otherwise would not be able to afford. These days, a number of land trusts are developing residential multifamily condominiums for low and moderate income families. However, the current Residential Condominium Act provides that a residential condominium cannot be created by a land trust. To get around this prohibition, the land trusts need to create 2 condominium regimes, a commercial condo and a residential condo, to allow for the land trust to develop a multi-unit condominium. This 2-step structure creates added complexity, time, diverts monetary resources, primarily attorney's fees, in developing affordable housing land trusts. So I ask you to pass this amendment to allow for condominiums to be created by affordable housing land trust, which otherwise would not be allowed under the Residential Condominium Act. Thank you.
Okay, who do you like to have go next?
All right. Good afternoon.
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Delegate Lewis, for sponsoring this bill. I am Melanie Thomas with the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, and we are creating permanently affordable housing in Curtis Bay and Cherry Hill in South Baltimore. And we are in favor of this bill and hope that the committee will give a favorable decision based on this. Based off of the development that we're currently doing, as Mr. Ehrenberg just stated, we had to create 2 condominium regimes to be able to work around and get through the multifamily unit dwelling that we are creating in Curtis Bay. And that has driven up the cost of the development. And as we're talking about creating permanently affordable housing, we are not passing that cost on to the end owners, right? So as a community land trust and a 501c3 nonprofit, those costs to have these established really do put a strain on groups like us that may not have the means or access to be able to create 2 condominium regimes. So this bill, when passed, speaking it into being, will help to erase or eliminate that additional piece of amendment that is needed to be in place, and it will help take a bit of the financial burden away from groups like ours and help us in the creation of permanently affordable housing. We've heard from the many bills before that permanently affordable housing is something that is truly needed, and this will definitely be a favorable amendment to the current condo law. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Wilson Randall. Again, I'm the Executive Director of Community Development Network. You've heard from our board member, Dan Ehrenberg, and folks working at the Southwest Partnership. I just want to add that as I have emphasized before, there is an urgent need for affordable housing in Maryland, and we want to use as many tools as possible to address this need. And community land trusts offer an excellent opportunity to create permanent affordability in the state of Maryland. I think that this technical amendment really, what it helps us do is have more tools to have condominiums, to just have more tools in the toolbox of affordable housing development and sustainable affordability over time. So I would just respectfully request your favorable report for House Bill 567, and I'm going to leave it to my colleagues, yield the time for them to speak more about this amendment. But thank you so much.
Okay, well, we don't yield time here, but who would like to go next for 2 minutes?
Hello, I'm Kimberly Ming. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hey, hi, thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm a partner at a law firm, Whiteford, Taylor & Preston. I'm here with my other partner, Caitlin Zaro, to testify in favor of this bill, even though we probably stand the most to lose in attorney's fees. Both Caitlin and I work deeply with land trusts and also in condominium regimes, and also work both in urban areas and suburban areas. This clarification, which is what we perceive it to be as attorneys and working with the statute, will allow the land trust to utilize what we would consider an extremely effective tool in being able to allow properties to be converted or to be built from the ground up in a condominium regime to allow for a unit to be purchased in a more manageable and affordable way. From the legal perspective, as a practitioner, when we were dealing with the land trust statute and we're dealing with the condominium statute, this was a gap and a clarification that we think is warranted and does not in any way, from our perspective, undermine the intent behind the statute, because a land trust and the condominium regime structure would be a permanent residential solution. I have nothing further.
Okay, I presume you're Peter Sabonis?
That's a good presumption. I'm Peter Sabonis. I am testifying on behalf of the Share Baltimore Affordable Housing Land Trust Network. Affordable housing land trusts are also referred to as community land trusts. They provide essentially security of tenure and permanent affordability to those who live in the units, the housing units that are owned by community nonprofits. And they are the housing units and the ownership of land are tied together in an affordable housing land trust agreement, which has been authorized by statute in Maryland. The Community Land Trust Network of Share in Baltimore supports 7 community land trusts in Baltimore through mutual learning, mutual exchange, technical assistance. And as you heard today already, a number of our land trusts, at least one in particular in South Baltimore, has encountered this technical issue with the condominium regime, which involves essentially that the Affordable Land Trust Agreement can be construed as a leasehold. And that should not be the case. It could, I think it's arguable that this is ambiguous. To me, it's pretty clear. It's not a leasehold, but this actually clears up any confusion about that. And contrary to what I learned in my first year as a legislative attorney in the Senate Ways and Means Committee of Massachusetts, sometimes there is a bill that is just a technical bill. I was always told to be suspicious of those. Thank you very much.
And wisely so. Is Denise Jones Dorsey here?
She was unable to make it today because of illness.
Well, Caitlin Zaro is also signed up, although informationally. Is Caitlin here? Are you here to just answer questions? Okay, all right. Well, in that case, we do have a number of questions. The first goes to Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Delegate Lewis. I'm very interested in this. This is interesting. I guess I already said that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Why are 2 condominium, why do you need to establish 2 condominiums? I don't understand that. I guess maybe one is for the land and one is for the units? Okay, all right, thank you very much.
I could answer it, but I don't know. I think you might rather hear from. Could I try?
Sure.
And in this
Let me
committee,
see
more
if
than one person
Let me see
can.
if I taught you very well. Go ahead.
Yes, yes. So here's the idea. And let me just mention that this bill came about because the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, in its efforts to start, building permanently affordable housing, came upon this obstacle. And in our efforts, myself and my district colleagues, in our efforts to help the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, we realized there was this obstacle in state law. So here's how I understand it. The Community Land Trust is looking to purchase the land as well as develop on that land a multi-family dwelling unit. So the acquisition of the land makes them subject to the ground lease provisions in state law. So when they want to purchase the land, build a new multi-family dwelling unit, they would have to pay an extra cost to create 2 condominium regimes. And that's about as much as I can tell you before I hand it over to a more expert. Would that be you, ma'am? Okay, please.
So, by the way, I forgot to clarify, I am here on a non-compensated basis. So this is just me personally interested in having this clarification made. So there is, that's funny. So there is a residential condominium regime, and then there's something called a commercial condominium regime. So the way that we were able to navigate this issue is that there are certain portions of the statute that only apply to residential. And this particular portion of the statute specifically stated that residential condominium regimes cannot be contained on leasehold property unless, and that's what you're looking at here, there is a reversionary interest in like A, B, or C. So, but the way that we navigated that was we established a commercial condominium regime, which is not subject to those limitations. And then within that commercial condominium regime are establishing a sub-regime of residential units that will be contained within a condominium unit and thus not subject to the statute. And it's an unnecessary layer from my perspective.
Is this project you're constructing, is this in the city?
Yes.
Let me ask another question then. If there were no such thing as ground rents, would you still have to create does this create two condominiums because of the ground lease statute? No?
Wait, Dan,
No,
can you go as well?
no,
answer?
that's not. When the original Affordable Housing Land Trust Act was passed, and it's specific to Maryland, most jurisdictions do not require a specific act for land trust. It's because ground leases are disfavored in Maryland. So basically what the statute did is say that if you're an affordable housing land trust, and if you have an affordable housing land trust agreement that meets the parameters of the statute, then it's not considered a ground lease.
Okay, I got you.
And so, but the issue is that the condominium law currently is ambiguous because it says you can't create a residential condominium on a leasehold estate.
Leasehold, okay, I got you. But this is interesting. I like this. You guys are going to make me go to law school yet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, okay. Any further questions for the sponsor or any of her witnesses? Seeing none, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 567, and believe it or not, it ends the public hearing for today. Announcements. We can go. Announcement. Oh, yeah, excuse me. Yeah, okay. By the way, we're going to have to do a procedural vote very shortly, but let's do announcements. Delegate Boyce.
We will meet after procedural votes, natural resources online.
Okay. Any, yeah, right. Any other announcements here? Okay, so we have a procedural vote that we have to, oh, I have to stop the meeting and we'll start up in when? 1 minute. Okay, we're adjourned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back on in 1 minute. We are moving to re-refer it to the Ways and Means Committee. We have to do it as economic matters and Ways and Means. The way the bill's drafted, it really belongs in those committees. I believe we've exceeded a 7-day rule, which means that we can only do it by a vote of the committee. So the motion is to re-refer House Bill 889 jointly to the Ways and Means and Economic Matters Committee. Is there a second? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote, and we'll do this by voice. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, so it's unanimous among those present, which means everybody except for Delegate Lewis and Delegate Guyton, who are not here presently, and both of them, what? Did I say Lewis? I meant Stewart. Well, she's definitely not here either. So Stewart and Guyton, both of whom have excused absences. Okay, next, next we have to have a motion to make an exception to Rule 41A of the House. What this rule, by exempting this rule, what we're basically saying is that we don't have to report out a bill that's voted on in here within 3 days. And the reason we've done that by practice is that if we discover some problem comes up and that we have to do more language amendments, we'll just bring it back before the committee and vote on it again, and then we'll pass it out. So the motion is to suspend Rule 41A of the House of Delegates. Is there a second? Any discussion on this? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The motion carries, and Delegates Guyton and Stewart are excused, have an excuse for their absence. And so, any further announcements before we adjourn? Anybody? Okay. Meeting adjourned. Tomorrow, we've got a lot of witnesses.